Okay, what we're going to talk about today is video calling. Now, there's something fundamentally illogical about teaching people about video calling on a video call, because you wouldn't be here if you couldn't do the basics of it, even though emails go to spam folders and all the rest of it. It's still slightly unusual situation to be talking about doing something like this way. What are we going to cover? Well, first of all, a little bit about the history of calling, to put into context where we are. It's a rapidly moving field at the present moment. A lot of companies vying for business and in different ways. We're going to look at various types of call, because the way that you use personal video calling and this kind of calling, which I would call work calling or group calling, they're actually quite different, even though they're using the same technology. We'll look at the benefits, and we'll also look at the drawbacks, because it's not a solution to everything. In fact, in some ways, it creates as many issues as it solves. We'll look at some of the common apps that people can use, how to set them up, and then we'll give you some tips on personal calling and group calling. Some of the tips are the same, some of them aren't. So let's go back in history. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, in what seems like a totally different galaxy, when it was possible to walk around the streets and shake hands with your neighbours, when the first phones came in practice, very, very few people had them. In fact, I remember we were about the first people to get phones that we knew of, because my father got one from work. This was only in the 1950s, folk. And people used to ask if they could use our phone to phone relatives, whatever. Phones were complicated. If you were on the Waverley Exchange in Edinburgh, which I think is maybe 225 now, if you wanted to phone anybody in the Morningside Exchange, you had to get the operator to connect you, because you could not dial anything other than your own number. So you had each exchange had a 4-digit number. So if you were 3333, you could only dial people in that exchange. So you had to pay for the connection, you had to pay for the operator. And then local dialing came in, so that you could actually dial right across the city of Edinburgh, except Morningside, because Morningside wasn't Edinburgh for a while, and you still had to get the operator. But time moved on and you could dial nationally. Very often, if you're dialing to other parts of the country, you still had to get the operator involved, and it still cost a fortune. And those of you who are of a certain age will remember that if you made a trunk call, which was a long distance call, you had to get the operator involved. And at the 3-minute mark, you'd get the 3 pips to give you 10 seconds to hang up, or you get hit with another 3 minutes charge. And those calls were expensive. Then suddenly there was the mobile revolution. The first mobile that I got was so big that the battery pack was the size of my briefcase, and it was very expensive to use. If I was in Glasgow and I wanted to phone a landline number in Edinburgh, it was 88 pence a minute. And that was a few years ago, just to make a mobile call. And now devices have become a bit more affordable, and calling is almost free. Now, I'm being very careful with that word free. What happens is, and depending upon how you do it, whether you get your contract and phone from the same company, or whether you get a SIM-only contract, unlimited minutes is pretty well the normal. You used to be charged 20 pence for a text and 20 pence a minute to make calls not that long ago. Now it's almost free. And data is the big thing that the networks are selling. And do you know what takes most data of anything out there? It's video calling. So it's no wonder that the networks want people to do video calling on their iPhones, their Android phones, their tablets, whatever, because it uses lots of data, and that's the only way they can make money from us anymore. So let's look at the types of call that we can make. How do we actually use video calling? Well, first of all, there's personal calls, the friends and family calls, and those can be one-to-one. I can phone my brother, who is currently in Orkney in the north of Scotland. Equally, he can call me, and when I was stranded abroad because the airlines kept on cancelling all my flights home, he was able to call me on the exact same basis on video calling, and we could chat away quite happily because it's one-to-one, or in more and more now one-to-many, so I could chat to my son and my brother and their daughter at the same time, all on the same call, and it's free. But there's also increasingly business and group calls like this, which are more formal, more structured. Those of you that are into watching some of the live shows on TV, things like the Graham Norton show, they have virtual audiences of up to 100 people watching the show, and there's got to be very, very tight restrictions on what people can and cannot do to disrupt things. But it's quite funny sometimes watching people in these environments. Some of them are dressed up and some of them are in their nightgowns and so on. Rules have got to be sensible, but those two different types of video calling are actually using the same technology in a fundamentally different way. So looking at the fundamentals, we're going to start off looking at the personal calls. Now, these could be both spontaneous or planned. In other words, I'm sitting in the back garden as I was last night, where we had had sun and it was lovely, and my brother had the same sort of weather up in Orkney, and I just picked up my phone and launched a video call with him, and he could see the sunset here. I could watch the birds flying over his house in Orkney as he sat outside having a can of local ale. It can be like that, or it can be planned. I was reading about a grandmother who, I think she's in Fife, and her grandkids are in Alberta in Canada. And 2 or 3 times a week, she reads them a bedtime story. Apparently the kids love the Katie Morag stories, but she can read them a bedtime story quite happily from her home in Scotland, and put the grandkids to bed, albeit it's a completely crazy time for us, but they love it. This is Granny's bedtime story. So planning or spontaneity. Personal calls tend to be much more chatty. There's no agenda. There's always personal agendas, but you're not doing anything more than just having a chat the same way that you would face to face, and in many ways more relaxed than if it was a pure voice conversation. Most of the apps that you use for personal video calling have got no maximum length on the call. And in fact, some I've known have been hours long, because people are watching things, watching sunsets, watching family, not quite babysitting, but keeping an eye on the kids while mother has a shower or whatever, that sort of thing. And it can be really nice. It allows you to be somewhere where you're not, and to see things that are happening where you aren't. You're sharing together time, and the degree of that togetherness is really down to who the person you're chatting to. And it can be really, really nice. It's particularly in these times of restrictions, it's a way of keeping contact and keeping the bonds of friendship and family quite strong. Business and group calls, however, by necessity, as I was saying, have to be more structured. Typically, you'll be working to an agenda which will have been circulated by email normally, and that agenda will have a series of topics. By definition, then, these meetings are more formal, and there will be some sort of etiquette. Usually, all the mics are muted except of the speaker. If it's a small group, maybe the mics aren't muted, but you just keep silent in the background so the focus doesn't come on you. But it allows you to have small and large meetings quite comfortably. And different organizations have developed different etiquette rules, and some of the software that's available for business meetings, if you want to talk, you tap a button on your keyboard, and it flags to the chairman or the moderator or whatever. We're not doing anything like that. It's nice and simple here. And the real advantage of it is no travel. Now, I've been talking to a few people about video conferencing meetings and no travel and so on. And it's always dangerous to try and draw rules or to try and draw conclusions. We're only talking to a couple of people. But my next door neighbour is a civil engineer, and he's involved in some large construction projects. He has an office in Shotts, and even before first lockdown last year, he was only going into the office once every 2 or 3 weeks, because why travel when you can do, you can work from home and do all your work there, and only video conference when you can, and only go to the office when you have to. He's now not been at his office for 14 months. And I mentioned this to my son, and he said, oh, that's quite recent. I've not been in my office for almost 2 years. He's not even sure he's got a desk in his office anymore, because working from home is easier. He's working in a team. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what he's working on because it's actually quite interesting. Let's just say that he liaises with the security services for a bank. But his team, they have secure video conferencing using Zoom, which we are just now, and they do all of it using that. So the ability to remove traveling, but to keep communication has a lot of benefits. But obviously, it's also got some drawbacks. So let's look a little bit more detail about some of these benefits. Well, the first one is, as I say, no travel, and that means fewer delays. The number of meetings that I've been at where a tailback in the M8 or roadworks we hadn't expected on the M876, or ScotRail cancel the train that you're planning to be on, and then all of a sudden somebody can't be there, or it arrives late and they've got an important part of the meeting and blah, blah, blah. By using video conferencing, you're cutting your costs and you're cutting your risk of delays. Business meetings can also be, despite what I said about having an agenda and being planned, they can also be very impromptu. So Ian and Katie and Inma and I could decide to have a quick chat after this about how we're going to deal with some of the questions that come up. And we can very quickly just pull together a video call, which can be, I'm using my laptop at the moment. It could equally well be on my phone or my tablet. And that's another one of the benefits. It can be when and where you want it to be, as much as a business one, because it's easy to break out. I know that some organizations and some charities, what they're doing is they're having big meetings, and then groups are breaking out. If you want to talk about this, go to, join room 1. If you want to talk about this, join room 2. If you just want to have a general catch up about what's happening with something else, go to room 3. So you can break out of these things and then come back together again. And you can guarantee the coffee is going to be better where you are than it is at any of these meetings. And anyone that's been to the the SIT office in the church there will know that the coffee is not the best in the world. Guaranteed your coffee is better. And because of the nature of these things, they are typically calmer meetings. Though there have been some wonderful videos on YouTube lately of video conference sessions in one particular council down south, which went completely awry because the moderator did not moderate an immoderate councillor who just decided to get highly upset. But typically, these meetings are calmer. And they can be wherever. As I was saying earlier, there is no restriction on where it can be. And the days of having to go to London for the monthly meeting or the annual meeting, which this year is going to be in Buenos Aires or whatever, all these costs can be cut out of the equation. Because at the end of the day, it is just as easy as a phone call. Now, I appreciate we're using Zoom here. There are extra complications, but it's still relatively straightforward. I was on my first video call the best part of 20 years ago, and it was vastly expensive with production quality cameras and all the rest of it. And one side of the table were all members of the university staff who were based in head office. And the other side of the table were a succession of screens. And that was, there was a screen for Perth, a screen for the Western Isles, a screen for Orkney, a screen for Shetland, the University of the Highlands and Islands board that I was on for a period. And once you got used to the fact that half of the people in the meeting were sitting in their own office, that was great. And it was extremely complicated and expensive, and it required half a dozen techies running around the place. Now, I'm doing this on my laptop. I'm using in case you're wondering if I'm playing games on it, I'm actually controlling the presentation from the phone. It just makes it a bit easier to do. It's all relatively straightforward. So what are the drawbacks? What are the things that can be problematic with video calling? Well, the first one is that you need good internet, and you'll never guess that was something that I added in yesterday after all the excitement that we had with our internet here. You do need a good internet connection. Some of the apps are very temperamental. If the internet even slows down a little bit because somebody nearby is using it, it can just freeze or kick you out or whatever. It can actually be extremely frustrating. But it is predicated on good internet. No internet, no video calling. We're back to the old ways. It's something of a triumph when you understand how the internet works, that actually we can do all this on the internet, but it does generally work. Having said that, I just got a message as I was sitting here that our internet's going to be disconnected later on today, so it's actually working out fine. These things can be impersonal. There is nothing like before a meeting, when you're just milling around, grabbing the cup of coffee, and if you're at the ICT or ACIT offices, I'm not making any comment about the coffee again, but just milling around before a meeting, how's things, what were the buses like, how did you get on with such and such, and then the same thing after it. Video calling, particularly group calling, can be quite impersonal because you do not have that human connection that we're so used to. This is the one that I've heard so many people talking about in group sessions and business meetings. They are more tiring. If you're going from one video conferencing session to the next one, it is far more exhausting than having 3 or 4 meetings in a row. You need to concentrate more. And the honest reality is, and we've all done it, when you've been in a a group meeting or a business meeting, if people are talking about budgets, and I don't have any responsibility for budgets, when they're talking about budgets, my mind goes into freewheel and I can afford to think about other things. If you're in a video conferencing session, you can't, because everyone can see you all the time. And if you look off camera at all, everyone sees you looking off camera. So you've got to concentrate all the time, even on things that you're fundamentally disinterested in. It is more tiring. And some of the apps are very complex. Now, I'll come back to this in a bit, but there's a range of, it couldn't be simpler. It's just like making a phone call, and in practice with some of them, even easier than making a phone call, to you need to have a training course to be able to set up the bit of software that you're using. So what are the common apps that people use for video calling? FaceTime, which is Apple only, is reckoned to have the best quality, partly because Apple control the handsets or the laptops and the tablets that they make, and they leverage the technology in that so that the software works easy. It is as easy as making a phone call. And you can have one-to-one, one-to-many, no bother at all. And it doesn't really get too upset if the network quality drops. You might get the odd stutter in the video. You might occasionally get the odd stutter in the audio, but it's actually very straightforward. The next best on the market, the old favorite, Skype. Now, it was one of the little tragedies of the world that Skype got bought over by Microsoft, because Skype were years ahead with audio and video calling when that happened. Unfortunately, Microsoft have not invested as much as they could have done in what the technology was able to do. But for video calling, one-to-one, one-to-many, Skype actually is very, very good, and it works on everything. It works on not all phones, virtually all phones, virtually all tablets. It's completely unconcerned by what you're using. It's relatively secure and simple to use. And if you're setting up group calls, I call Ian, and then I can then call Inma or Katie and add them into the call, or I could be having a separate call with each of them and passing information back and forward, which I've done on a couple of occasions on Skype, which is not as easy to do with other platforms. Another advantage of Skype is that it's free, which is why maybe Microsoft haven't invested as much in it as they could do, because Microsoft are not great fans of free. WhatsApp is one that a lot of people use for sending messages. It's a messaging system. It's absolutely excellent piece of software. It works very well on phones, but if you want to try and use it on other devices, you've got, all of a sudden you've got extra issues to go around. And WhatsApp has become a little bit less popular because Facebook have announced that they're going to track all your data across WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And a lot of people are quite nervous of all their data being in the hands of one company. And of course, Facebook Messenger, if you use Facebook Messenger for chat or for sending pictures or videos, whatever, you can also make audio and video calls, but that now means that Facebook know even more about you. And some of you have probably seen that there is a massive legal battle going on between Apple and Facebook at the moment. Apple are neurotic about secrecy. Facebook are neurotic about selling data because that's where they make their money. And it's popped up in a few courts all over the place. And it's going to be an interesting one to watch. But Facebook Messenger is also a very, very good way of chatting. Zoom is the next one that people use personally. It can be time limited in the length of your session. It's more complicated to use, as we've seen here, but it is becomes something of a standard. And there's plenty others. When I was setting the session up, I just did the obvious thing about Googling video calling platforms, personal and business, and there must be another 20 or 30 out there, most of which are very, very niche and serve particular communities. For business then, for the sort of, or this sort of session, well, Zoom has become the standard. In the same way you talk about hoovering the floor and not sharking the floor, you talk about Zoom as the video conferencing standard, and it is. It's the one that everyone uses. They had, this time last year, they had real problems with security, and there were things called Zoom bombing, where people could suddenly launch into a private meeting from outside because they've got hold of the data, and some of what was happening was actually beyond silly and beyond unacceptable. Zoom have now solved most of those problems. The data is encrypted, it is secure, and it does what people want. There are some things about it, I'm sure Ian will tell you, and Inma will tell you, make you want to bang your head against a brick wall, but it's relatively good. Skype, still used by a lot of businesses, and because there is no time limit on it, a lot of businesses, particularly smaller ones, find it's got a lot of advantages. Now, we've got a paid license for Zoom because we want to breach the 40-minute limit that Zoom put on calls. Skype is free, virtually free, for everything, but we tried to do this sort of session on Skype and found that its screen sharing capabilities were a bit unstable, so we had to dispense with free and go with the Zoom option. Some of you may have heard about Google Meet. Unusually for Google, they were actually quite late to the party. And when they tried to buy their way into it by buying an existing big player, that didn't work out. So Google Meet is used by some people, and it's a good piece of software. I've never needed to use it myself. Microsoft Teams. Now, this is the one that we started off with. Virtually all businesses have got licenses for Microsoft Office, so they can use Word, PowerPoint for presentations, Excel for spreadsheets, and so on. If you're buying a corporate license for a desk and you also get your email built into it, you also get a license for Microsoft Teams. So why aren't we using Microsoft Teams? Because, as Ian will tell you, we already have that license. Why aren't we able to use that here? Well, very simple. Microsoft don't like free, and because I'm an Apple user, I get the equivalent of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint free from Apple. I use Apple's Keynote for my presentations, which I find more flexible, and it's free, so it doesn't work. Microsoft Teams actively blocks us from using anything other than Microsoft software. And of all of the pieces of software I've ever seen, and I worked in this industry since I was 19 years old, which wasn't yesterday, Microsoft Teams has got the most complicated setup of any piece of software I've ever seen. So, as you can gather, Colin is not a fan of Microsoft Teams. So how do you set up these bits of software? Well, first of all, someone has got to start the call. In this case, I think it was Inma that set the call up. One person has got to set up the call as the administrator or moderator or whatever. And in a business sense, that means that the call has got to be agreed. You set up meeting IDs and all of these things. And then everyone has got to be on the same software. So if we're using Zoom, we are all using Zoom. It's not like the phone call in that sense, because if I'm making a phone call to Ian and Ian's got an Android phone and I've got an Apple phone, I can phone him and we can speak to each other in the exact normal way that you'd expect to do. That doesn't happen when you're using video calling. You've got to be in the same software, and increasingly you've got to have that up to date. You might be on, I don't know the version numbers, you might be on Zoom 47.2, but if somebody is on Zoom 46, they will not be allowed to connect necessarily to somebody who's on that. So there are issues with it. The key thing is to make sure that you've got everything set up properly to start with, and you get a chance to play with it. And then you get the chance either to invite people or accept people. Now, this session is working on the basis of both, in that the invites were sent out by email. For some people, those invitations popped into their spam folder. For some, they didn't. And if you watch the video from last week, you'll get a couple of tips of how to stop things going to spam that you want to see. And then when people join, you were kept in the waiting room while we checked that the technology was behaving itself today, because it doesn't always. And then people get accepted into the session. Obviously, you want to mute the microphones, because things can go wrong, and you can get terrible echoes if somebody's got their speaker up and the way their microphone's set up is quite complicated, or if they're in a room with a lot of echo. All of a sudden you can get a tremendous amount of whistle and feedback, which means that nobody can hear anything. So a few hints and tips. First of all, before you make the call or before you accept the call, settle down. If somebody says, or somebody calls you on one of the personal video calling apps and says, can we chat? And you just say, give me 2 minutes, I'll just finish what I'm doing. Get sat down. There's nothing worse on a personal basis than being hassled and harassed. Settle down, and then you can chat comfortably. Make sure that your face is in light. If you end up in a situation that the light is behind you, then your face is in shadow, and it's actually quite difficult to cope with. I had a light earlier on sitting up behind me, which made it look like I had a halo, which is as far from the truth as possible. So that light went off. But just make sure you're sitting in a place where the lighting looks quite nice. Make sure you've got a decent background. Now, if you're looking at any of the video chats that happen with people who are on daytime television, regularly they're in front of a bookcase. I find that quite interesting, but I also find it very distracting, because I find myself trying to read what the book titles are and not actually listening to what the people are saying. In Katie's case, and Katie's not here, so I can say that, Katie doesn't have a bookcase. She's got a DVD rack behind her. And I find myself trying to see what DVDs she's been reading, because that sort of detail behind you, the artwork that you've got, or the bits of ornaments and so on, it's just the natural thing that we do. I have in the past used what's called a virtual background. Now, I don't know if you know what that is, but Zoom does, FaceTime does, and various other of these bits of software allow you to have a virtual background. So it will look at your face, blank out everything that's behind you, and put a photograph of somewhere, or a live video of somewhere behind you. So it can look like you're sitting in front of a waterfall or in front of the Northern Lights, which I saw in someone's recently. And it's absolutely fascinating, but very distracting, because you're so busy enjoying their background, you stop listening to them. But it can be better than a very cluttered background. In the same way that you want to be settled, you want to feel good, and you want to feel that you're looking good. If you think your hair's all over the place because you've not had a lockdown haircut, if you feel that your makeup's not right, if you don't like wearing this jacket or that shirt, you will feel slightly uncomfortable. So it's actually better just to take a minute or two to get organized. You will feel much happier and more relaxed in a call like that if you're wearing what you feel comfortable in. But the most important thing to wear is the smile. I remember being told years and years ago that the only emotion that you can pass down a telephone is a smile. And if you're smiling, the person at the far end can hear it. And if you're not, they can hear it. It's even more true on video. Smile, even if what the person's saying is utterly inane or totally boring. Smile. Just give them positive feedback, because it actually helps. It helps you and it helps them. And no matter what the situation is, let them talk too. I've been on video calls, not with my brother, because that's not how it is, but I've been on video calls where the other person talks for 20 minutes out of the 30, asks a couple of questions, doesn't listen to the answers, and starts talking again. It's a dialogue, not a monologue. Take time just to listen. If the other person wanted you to be able to video call them, at least let them have a part of what's going on. So what about the group calls then? Well, everything that was said about the personal calls applies here too. Smiling, feeling you're right. I've seen a number of people online saying that they have their smart shirt, and whatever, and some people have their tie and their jacket, whatever, for the video call. But they're wearing their tatty jeans, or they're wearing their pajama trousers underneath the desk. Why not? You're only being seen above the desk, so why not? And getting the right background. And sometimes here, a virtual background is actually very useful, because it takes away your personal space from a business meeting. But there is a downside to a virtual background, because we did some playing around with it before the session last week, and the virtual background slows down both my computer and yours, because it's doing a lot more work. It's actually taking up more data. They look much better, but there are costs. You need to prepare in the same way that you would do with any meeting like this. If I just turned up and started chatting and I'd done absolutely no preparation for it, it's going to be a waste of time. You may well say it's a waste of time anyway, but that's a different creature. But just prepare for it. And you have to go through all of the documentation, and you need to be dressed right for the story. So if it's a very formal, very senior level meeting, you would dress differently to if it's just you and your team. Whereas at work, you would be wearing your suit and whatever else. You can be a little bit more casual, but it's still a business meeting. As a rule, and not a total rule, but as a rule, you'd want to make sure that you mute the mic unless talking. And as I said again, there is this whole issue that you do need to be sure that you're concentrating all the time, because things can happen very quickly in a meeting like this, because people can say things assume that you've got on board with it and move on, because you don't have the picking up the pen, hold on a second, you know, can't just think about that. You don't have all of that interplay in a video conference. As many of you are doing just now, you want to scribble down notes because these things are very fleeting, and very often there is nobody who's taking formal minutes in the way that there might be in a work environment. And you want to make sure that you don't have interruptions. We've all seen the famous video of the BBC reporter who was doing something very important when the kids came into the room and started playing. Golden Labs, and the bottom one actually is from a House of Commons video, which I won't play the whole thing of, but an MP was making a very important point, and his cat decided to walk across his keyboard and wave its tail at in front of him. You can see the colour of his face when it happened, but it's so easy. It's the old thing, you know, that in the days of vaudeville, of variety theatre, never work with children and animals. Well, they are the absolute bane of your life when you've got video conferencing, because they can completely blow your concentration, and you then got another 3 or 4 minutes till everybody else who's in the video call stops laughing before you can get back to whatever it was you were talking about. By now I've forgotten. So, just summarizing, video calling is amazing. As a piece of technology, it is really just stunning. I remember when Apple launched FaceTime the first time, and I had that experience with the University of the Highlands and Islands with these, you know, this room full of screens and technology, and Apple at the release of one of the iPhones announced FaceTime, the ability to have a video call from person to person. And I remember thinking, nobody will ever use that. Why, you know, how's that going to work? As soon as I had that phone and somebody else had that phone, we started to realize actually they had something. And video calling has completely changed how we do things. It's certainly changed how our family chit-chats around the place, because you can just pop up a video call. Look at this, I'm sitting by the beach and it's lovely and blah, 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 and you can hear the birds and whatever else is going on. It's amazing. And can you imagine during this year of COVID, what it would have been like without video calling? How would businesses have kept going? How would they have coped in the days when we were using the old phones, but you couldn't have groups of people together? It would have been an absolute disaster. It allows you to maintain contact at all levels and all types, though it can be demanding, particularly in a business situation, because you've got to relearn how to concentrate in meetings in the same way that maybe it's at school or at college, you just listen to the teacher hour upon hour. By and large, it's easy. In practice, for personal calling, it's as easy for me to video call somebody as to phone call somebody, as long as I've got data. You'll be completely unsurprised when I tell you that I've got unlimited data on my phone, because video calls burn through data like nothing else you ever come across. And it can be any time, it can be any place. During the Winter Watch and Spring Watch programs that BBC do, very often they have people who are just walking around with phones and things, showing you what they're seeing, showing you the wildlife, showing you the scenery, because it doesn't matter where they are, you can communicate this way. And it's almost free, as long as you've got two things. One, a device, something that will do it, whether it's desktop, laptop, phone, whatever, and you've got a contract that gives you enough data to do it. I wouldn't tell you, I couldn't tell you, I wouldn't want to tell you how much data you could burn through in a couple of video calls. And I've known people in the one-to-one sessions we have who said, I just had a call with my son last night, but I've got no data left. Yep, you've got no data left because video calling takes it all. But the important fact is you had a video call with your son last night. So